The law matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program has been created to educate and inform and help you with law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better, and you're in a better position to protect yourself, your family, and your business. We provide information and resources to help you decide whether or not you might actually want to handle some issues yourself. If you do decide that you want to contact outside counsel, you'll be better prepared, and as a result, so will they. Either way, you'll be better prepared, save yourself some time, money, and hopefully achieve better results. We want to welcome and thank, as always, from the Bazar Grasso law firm in East Providence, Jackie Grasso and David Bazar, who continue to offer their insights and their counsel on the various topics that we will tackle. Today, we have a little bit of a different kind of topic. Are you thinking about becoming a lawyer? Thinking about going to law school? We figured there are a few things that you should know, from undergraduate courses to part-time jobs to life after graduation. So if you've ever read John Grisham, you know that there are wonderful stories about all of the money that they make, hundreds of millions all of the time, but of course that's not always the case, and even those who aren't making that, what the salaries are nothing to sneeze at. We thought we would go back and discuss with the lawyers, those who both practice and share information with others by teaching, and give you a little insight about the kinds of things that you should be aware of if you are considering this as a way to study or perhaps as a career change. So, Jackie, David, obviously you've both been to law school. Share a little bit about what you did as undergraduate. There's no such thing as typically, as I understand, pre-law as the undergraduate, although some places do call it that. Jackie, what did you do?
Well, some people will they would major in political science as a pre-law. But when I went to college, being a lawyer was the last thing on my mind, so I went to college with a concentration in English and education, which, by the way, English is a very good major to have when you're considering going to law school, because what do lawyers do besides talk? They write.
And write.
So that's what I did, and it wasn't until like 2 years after college that I decided I wanted to further my education and go to law school. But I didn't have any pre-law classes. I suppose it would have helped, but I think the English major helped immensely.
Yeah,
David?
It doesn't really matter at all what you're majoring in. In fact, I think many law schools prefer that people have diverse backgrounds and take different things and different routes to law school. So for me, actually, when I went to college my freshman year, I went as pre-med, biology major. And so we were in a biology lab, and I had to cut the head off a rat and drain the blood into the sink, and I said, I don't like blood, mine or anybody else's. So biology was out. So I was a sophomore sitting in French 101, and I really liked the professor. So I went up to her and I said, I'm thinking of being a French major. And she said, Monsieur Bazar, you're from Rhode Island, aren't you? I said, well, of course. She said, with your accent, you'd need 6 years in Paris. So that was done. So there I was in History 101, and the chair of the department teaches it with about 200 freshmen and 1 junior, me. And he tells a story about this bright young Trinity College grad who majored in history. And he was working at a major corporation just 3 or 4 years out of college, and he was vice president. So the CEO came out and he said to him, come into my office. He said, you're a bright young Trinity College graduate, you majored in history. I'm going to promote you to executive vice president and double your salary. So the young man said, well, thank you. And the fellow looked at him and he said, you went to Trinity College, you majored in history, I just doubled your salary, and all you can do is say thank you? He said, well, thank you very much, Dad. So I said, okay, now I know what I'm going to major in, because my plan was to go to work for my dad when I graduated. So there I was as a junior taking all these history courses, which what you have to do, type a lot of papers, and I was even before you, we didn't have computers. So there I was typing papers, and I decided my brother's girlfriend, my brother was in law school in Bridgeport, could type a lot better than I could, so I went down and she would type my papers, and he one day took me into the dean of the law school, and the dean said, where do you go to school? I said, Trinity. He says, we're trying to get more college students from Connecticut to apply, so apply, get a certain score on your LSAT, graduate from college, and we'll take you. So I went back to Trinity. I said, when do you give the LSAT? And they said on Monday. This was Monday. On Saturday. And then you could walk in, sign up, and take it, pay a late registration fee. So I did, and I went to law school. And so that's how I became.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
So we always hear that there's a glut of lawyers, but before you become a lawyer, you have to go to law school. And I understand that there are fewer law school applicants than ever before. Apparently, the applicant pool is down 22%. So that would mean, I guess, that the qualifications may be, I don't know if they're less, but certainly they are going to go deeper into the pool in order to pull from that. Does that mean you have a better shot than average? And what do you have to have for an LSAT score or a GPA these days?
Well, the qualification, I don't think they've, lessened what they require for a law student. Enrollments are down, I think, mostly because of economics, because people just don't have the money to go to law school. And the other reason is because there quite simply aren't any jobs in this area, or many lucrative jobs in practicing law. So by the time you get out of college, you probably have $200,000 in loans, go to law school for another 3 more years, add on another $200,000. You're saddled with debt by the time you get out, and you're lucky if you can find a job for $50,000 a year. So that's one of the things. LSAT scores, back when we took it, I think we needed like in the 30s, but I don't even think they score it that way anymore.
And when I took it, it was like the SAT, it was like 200 to 800 or something like that.
I don't even remember how they score it. And the LSATs have absolutely nothing to do with practicing law.
Right.
It's all logic.
Yeah, and I know that they want certain scores for whatever reason, but as I was saying, many law schools will look at the diverse pool that they're trying to pull in. I was telling them a story about my daughter, Caroline, the actress. When she was a theater major, that would have been a great major for her to go to law school because she could have been a trial attorney, because what we really do is tell stories, and it's sort of acting. My oldest daughter was an economics major, and she could have gone to law school and become, use it in her business, because the business law that she would have learned would have been very valuable in business. And my youngest daughter, the marketing fashionista, is a psychology major, and for family court, what are we doing all the time but counseling people? It's all psychology sometimes.
Definitely. I think it's fair enough to say, and it's true of many careers, that there's more than one way to get there. There are many different paths, and bringing up the fact that there are diverse majors that can get you there. My research indicated that if you're taking those LSATs, or if you're looking at GPAs, that if you were in the upper 75 percentile, that certainly puts you in a better position to be a bona fide and reasonable applicant. And of course, I suppose that's even more stringent if you wanted to be in those top 14 colleges or universities or law schools to qualify. But that notwithstanding, it seems that there's a very good reason to think that there are many ways to get there. So you brought up the point of the debt that you'd incur, whether you go to a public or a very top 14 kind of school. What are your thoughts about, as I read, many will take part-time classes and part-time work. Thoughts about that?
Well, that's the way I made my way through law school. So
Did you?
I went to school at night, Thursday nights, Friday nights, and all day Saturday. But I also worked full-time. So it was demanding. It was much more economical for me to go through law school back then. It was 21 years ago, and going to a school back then, it was less than $10,000 a year, and I also got some scholarships based upon my GPA.
Yes.
So it does take a little bit more time, but it is manageable. Financially, it's more manageable to do it that way. And, it took me about 4 years instead of 3 full-time. I was working full-time for 2 years before I applied to law school. That's something law schools actually do like, especially with night students. You find that the average age is not 21. The average age might be 30 or 40. And as you know, I teach, I'm a law professor at UMass, Dartmouth School of Law, and I do teach night classes, and the average age in the night class is not 20 or 21. The average age happens to be 30, maybe a little older. There are actually people that I went to school with. One gentleman was in his 60s. He was a retired school principal. I also went to school with a couple of physicians who decided, I want to supplement my education and maybe get a JD, which sometimes I think physicians, it's good for a physician to have JDs.
It's really good for people in all walks of life. As we were talking about, business people can use it. it's not just the education of what you learn, but it's learning how to think. And it's the deductive reasoning and all of that, the analogies that you have to make in analyzing cases and applying a set of facts that you have to a set of facts in a case that's precedent for your situation. It's all of that that goes into the law school education that makes it valuable.
And so, David, did you do part-time or were you full-time from the outset?
I was one of those rare people who went, no, I'm only kidding by rare. I went straight from college to law school and then on. But that's part of what makes that class diverse is people with all those different backgrounds. And when you have discussions in class about different things, all of those different points of view can bring a very interesting light to certain conversations.
You want to try and pick a law school that's going to be tailored to your schedule if you are working. Okay, going to school at night, 90% of the students are working full-time. Some law schools don't have that. For instance, Roger Williams, when they first became a law school, had a night program. And it was very convenient for those who decided, I want to go get another degree, maybe change careers, but I don't have to worry about, you know, being there on a full-time basis. Since Roger Williams dropped the night program, their enrollment went down. You know, and I think that was a disadvantage to the school. And the enrollment at UMass Dartmouth, where I teach, went up because they're one of the few schools in the area, local, that still has a part-time night program.
So they were adaptive to what they saw as a need that needed to be addressed.
Which answers the question that one of my law school roommates had is night students. Who are they? Yeah. What do? He wondered, do they sleep all day, come in, take classes, then go home? Of course, we know they worked and do all of those things, but he wanted to know when they graduate, can they actually practice during the day? That was his question. Oh. But no, seriously, in all of that, the advantages of being able to go at night and still practice makes it affordable for people who couldn't otherwise afford to do that. So to have that opportunity is really important. But it is a lot of work. And so if you can go straight from college on and just you're in the learning mode, so you haven't taken a break from that and you're just going right through, there's an advantage to that too.
Now, many, as you brought up, you were perhaps working a little bit beforehand. Many bring to the table various work experiences. Some had been entrepreneurs, some had been laid off from whatever job. So they bring some sort of work experience to the table. When you're in law school, did you find apprenticeship, internship, externship opportunities? Did you take advantage of them, and what did you do?
Well, most of the law schools now mandate that. So with my school, I did have to do an internship, and the way I fit it in was I worked 4 10-hour days to get my 40 hours in at work, and then 1 day a week on Thursdays, I was clerking for a judge in Barnstable District Court. So I had to drive from Providence all the way to Barnstable in the middle of winter, which was not fun, but that was the way that I had to fit that in. Somehow you have to do that, but it was an invaluable experience.
What's clerking? Describe the tasks.
Oh, clerking. It's kind of like being a judge's right arm. So you are researching issues for the judge. You're also writing decisions or helping judges, reach decisions, write opinions. And oddly enough, district court in Massachusetts does have juries. So I was able to sit in and watch some criminal trials with juries. District court in Rhode Island doesn't have juries, but no matter what, jury, no jury, whatever, if you can clerk with a court system, it's great. If you can clerk with a law firm, even better, because a lot of those clerkships end up into full-time jobs.
Which is what I did. Yeah. So after my first year of law school, I had started applying for a summer clerkship, and I sent applications to a bunch of folks, and I still remember some of those interviews to this day. And the one that I got, I interviewed with this fellow who you happen to know. Yeah.
And I saw his card today.
You did. Yes. So I said, I'd like to do this summer clerkship. And he said, well, we've never had a summer clerkship program. I said, that's okay. I've never done a summer clerkship. So he said, start tomorrow. And the first thing I did was a closing in the conference room of our office, our current office.
Our current office.
Yeah, which was then a bank.
That's right.
So, and then that went to a second summer clerkship and then a full-time job. And so, as Jackie was saying, that is a way to have entree to a law firm to potentially get a job. They get to see what you can do, you get to see what they do, and determine if it's a good fit.
To play the devil's advocate for a moment, it also would have taught you, perhaps, even though you were going to pursue your law degree, maybe you would have learned right then and there that that wasn't the side of the law that you wanted to practice on. So there's lots to be said for an internship or apprenticeship that tells you what you do like and also indicates some of the things that you prefer not to. Did you see some action, as they say, when you were interning?
Sure. It was great. I was writing memos. I remember writing a memo determining where somebody's workers' comp jurisdiction should lie, Massachusetts or Rhode Island, based on place of hire, where the injury happened, that type of thing. And got to go to court to see that put into play in the arguments in front of the judge. So it was very beneficial for me, and I think it was beneficial for the firm, because I was doing this research that a lot of times lawyers don't have time to really sit down and dig their arms and teeth into determining, what the arguments that they really need to make are.
And we, as a firm, had some summer interns
Yes.
in the past as well.
Yep, and it's been valuable for them and for us.
So you're full-fledged lawyers practicing for quite a few years. Are your tasks now still mundane in dealing with documents and minutiae, whether it's documents and emails, or do you have other people who are up and coming who are more likely to mince and parse all of that?
Well, we do pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have support staff. We have paralegals, and if some research has to be done, we'll have paralegals do that or prepare court pleadings. But at the end of the day, even if the paralegal does research, we're still responsible for preparing that document, being ready for court, reading the cases. So we still have to do the work.
Just as when you were in school.
Right. Yeah, and I love the law, so part of what I love is doing that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and Jackie and I both, to a large degree, will look things up ourselves and figure things out ourselves. But then what we really like to do is sit and bounce it back and forth with each other. And, here's my point of view. What do you see? Do you see something differently? And, go back and forth so that we can understand both sides or all sides of an issue.
What's the downside of what you do for your work of the work?
Okay, what's the downside? Sometimes people go into it, and I'm not saying this personally, but people will go into the law with a different concept of what it's all about. They read too many books, maybe they watch too many Law and Orders, I don't know. But it is not getting a Juris Doctorate degree on Monday and going into a law firm the following Monday and expect to get a $200,000 a year salary. It's just not there. It's just, maybe if you graduate first in your class from Yale Law, it's not there. It's difficult to make your way through being a lawyer, and competition is a factor. Experience is another factor. I mean, I, as a law professor, when I teach practical skills. I tell these people how to prepare complaints, what to do in court, give them war stories, and David's taught as well. When you get out of law school, you don't know the first thing about practicing law, and it's sad. And there is, the ABA is trying to put together a new model or switch the focus of education from the Socratic method to practical skills, and actually even suggest that law students take up some type of an internship similar to what physicians do before they become full-fledged physicians.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
residency.
Yeah. So I like the Socratic method, and I like that way of teaching and learning how to think. And I think it's good for a year or a year and a half. But then I do think that there is something to be said for the second half of the second year and the third year or something of doing the more practical things, so that you have that well-rounded experience and the ability to think like a lawyer. Because I remember the first day of law school, the introduction to the law, the theory, there was a whole lecture which I won't get into, but the bottom line was you'll know that you're thinking like a lawyer when, and it's so something's presented to you and you start thinking about all the permutations and issues that go into that, and so now you're thinking like a lawyer. And so learn how to think first year. They used to, what did they used to say? Work them to death. No, scare them to death, work them to death, bore them to death. That was the 3 years of law school. Yeah. So you're scared to death your first year of law school because it's the Socratic method you're being called on. It's paper chase, and the professors are these mean old guys or women at the front of the room calling on you and challenging you. And then the second year, it's a lot of work, and they're working you to death. And the third year, you've already done it, so now you're bored to death.
Well,
so that's how you could change it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, those that really struggle through law school, I tell them the same thing. All you need to do is get your ticket to take the bar exam. You know, you don't want to fail, obviously, but get your ticket, take the bar exam, and move on. That's really what you're doing. I mean, because even the last person to graduate medical school is still called a doctor, right? So,
good point.
Yeah, it's not that easy to start a business. And when I was getting out, I hung my own shingles, so to speak. I didn't go out there looking for jobs. At the time, I was fortunate enough to have a supplemental income from my husband, but you know, it's not that easy. And when you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know the first place to start. But I met you, right? And that's, you know, that's how I met you, yeah, because I signed up for an entrepreneurship training program through Bryant College, and I was able to put together a business plan, do some demographic studies, open an office, and here we are today. Yeah.
So for those who have their law degree but perhaps don't want to do what you do, namely run a law firm, there are countless other, well, I don't know, countless, but there are many other applications. Let's go through a few of them. Apart from the fact that we know that Judge Judy, who is a TV entertainer and a lawyer, she's, I understand,
the family court judge.
Family court judge, making the single highest paid talent on TV right now. Good gig. I think Martha Stewart had some background. We can name some others. Apart from doing the TV and entertainment, and who knows what your next chapter will be after doing these shows, but what else might a lawyer do with that degree if they don't want to be practicing and going into court? David?
Well, I told you the story about my brother who said, go to law school, and when you get out, we'll practice together. He's working for my father running the business. My brother-in-law went to law school, and he runs his family's business. So these are practical uses of that law degree because they use it in business every day. My brother-in-law in the fruit and produce business may not remember specifically the UCC provisions that apply to perishable goods and that type of thing, but I'm sure it's ingrained in him so that he really has an understanding of it. My brother, when he's placing pearls either on consignment or taking them and selling them and taking title back when they're transferred back and delivering them FOP or whatever it might be, FOB, it's all part of that law school training. So they use that every day.
Some people go into law enforcement. So, you know, for me, when I got out of law school, I actually applied to the FBI. And having a JD and being a lawyer is one of the things the FBI looks for. Back then, back in the early 90s, believe it or not, the FBI was on a hiring freeze. So I was able to go in, make my application. I actually went and talked to somebody in the local office. And then about 4 years later, I received a letter in the mail saying we are no longer on a hiring freeze. If you're still interested, please contact this office. And
you had already made some other choices.
Yeah.
So
you might become a mediator or an arbitrator.
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
right. You don't even have to be a lawyer to be a mediator.
You don't have to be a lawyer, but there's some help in being able to know the law and what you're talking about when you're mediating. Arbitration the same way. And it doesn't have to be an arbitration like through the court system. You could be a labor union type arbitrator or mediator. There's all types of areas where a law degree can be helpful.
Go into politics?
I was going to say there's government and politics. Of course, you're bringing up a couple of apart from the hard skills that you learn, the soft skills, good listening skills, ability to talk and negotiate and deal with conflict resolution, perhaps a little counseling, quote unquote. I use that term very loosely on the side. Address the mediation issue. I know that you both are lawyers. I understand you are both mediators too, and if I'm not sure that I have this correct, all lawyers could be mediators, not all mediators have to be lawyers.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So you are using listening skills, you're resolving some conflicts, you're trying to use some deductive reasoning about what makes sense in a given, whether it's business or divorce or whatever it is. So that's certainly a possibility. You were about to mention the politics and government. What are some of the
Some people go into public service, for instance, and you know, going into public service, I think nowadays if you're in public service for so many years after law school, you can actually get your loans forgiven. Some people do that.
Good to know.
Excuse me. They may be in-house counsel. They may not be practicing law, but they might be in-house counsel to a major corporation. What else? Insurance companies. You can go work for an insurance company.
At the administrative level, would you, maybe you do have someone who runs your office, do they need to have a law background too, or is it just a nice thing if they might? Some do, some don't?
That's more of a business thing.
That would be a waste of talent to have a lawyer. Well, I mean, when I was
apparently some of these
everything.
Apparently some of these larger businesses or some of the larger Fortune 500 companies do like having someone at that desk who's doing some screening and vetting. David?
Well, yeah, and we were talking about people who go to law school that don't actually practice law. So you could have a JD without taking the bar exam, work in a company. That's something that you have that you can use to your advantage. You're not going to give legal advice to your company that you're working for. You're not in-house counsel, as Jackie was talking about, but certainly you can analyze the issues that are coming up, and you'll have a much better understanding, hey, that sounds like our opening, as to what the lawyer is telling you when you sit down and go through an issue that you might have to bring a lawyer in for.
When I was in law school, we had, as I said, a retired school principal who was 67, 68 years old. And he graduated with me, and Providence Journal interviewed him afterwards, and they said to him, why would you want a law degree at this age, in this stage in your life? You're 65, 66. He goes, darned if I know. He just wanted to do it.
Well, there's value in education for education's sake.
Sure.
Let's dispel that nasty comment that often people make, those who can't teach. Well, you can and do, and you also teach. I think this is probably a good point to mention to those who want to take classes. They're learning from someone who is a practitioner as well.
Yeah, there's a school of thought on that, which is, you know, who are the better individuals to be a law professor? Someone who has never practiced law a day in their life, or someone who's been out there in the field and practicing law? So ABA has certain requirements. I think they're equally qualified, but in terms of being able to practice law and learning about the day-to-day skills, it's always great to have someone who's practicing. And we, as practitioners, are mostly adjunct professors. So I'm not a tenured professor. I'm not working full time. But there are some people who do graduate law school who never practice law, but they go into the educational profession part of it and just teach. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, I think there's trying to be a switch to have more lawyers come in as adjuncts and teach these practical skills courses.
Yeah, I think it's a good mix for the law school to have the academia, the people who sit and analyze things and write articles about what it is that they're analyzing, and get that type of deep thought for students to try to understand and comprehend what they're doing. But also, from our perspective, when Jackie and I teach, it's really good because for them to take what they learn in the book and then see it in action. This is how it's actually applied. So it is a good mix.
And I have students come to court with me, and they love it.
They love it.
Yeah.
What a great perspective that you get to offer them. So we've touched on academia, entrepreneurship, legal, government. I think we talked about business and finance. We didn't mention, but specifically lobbyists. Many of them are lawyers, not all are. Certainly there are plenty of careers apart from just those who want to be litigators. So we hope that that's been helpful to you. We thank you for tuning in to The Law Matters. We hope that this has given you some insight if you are thinking about taking classes or actually becoming a lawyer. We hope that you'll stay tuned to the discussion of law matters. It matters to you. Thank you for tuning in.